Aisha, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming all the way to Fort Worth to do it.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
I'm
looking forward.
excited.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Let's just start off with a little bit kind of about your story growing up and your background, and then we'll dive into it.
So I'm born and raised in Philly, South Philly. I've talked about the story quite a bit, but I had an interesting childhood. Like my mom was a teen mom. She had my sister at 16,
Okay.
me at 19. So my first home was in Passyunk Projects in South Philly, which no longer exists. It was probably then at the time before it was torn down, one of the poorest housing projects in the city of Philadelphia. But when you've got a village of great women, strong women, you don't quite realize you're poor.
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
We were loved immensely. So I didn't know we were poor. My mom was first generation college educated. So because she had that village, my grandmother specifically, who watched my sister and I, my mom was able to put herself through college. And it's funny because my mom just retired. She's young. I mean, one of the benefits of having a 19-year-old mom is we're like, I was telling her the other day, my hip is hurting. She's like, really? Like, get yourself together. So she's, I'm 43. She just turned 63. And she had a retirement party that I went to in Philly, which is why I went back to Philly. And one of her old friends who came got up and told a story about how my mom walked in the snow. Like, you hear these stories, like you walk, in the snow uphill.
5 miles.
No, literally, she tells the story about how SEPTA, which is the bus company in Philly, went on strike. And my mom had to get to college. So she walked from, if you know Philly, South Philadelphia, Passyunk Projects was like past Oregon Avenue, all the way up to Temple University, which is in North Philadelphia. I mean, that is far.
Damn.
So, I mean, she realized like an education was the only way out for her and her kids. So it was either, most of her friends, and I just look at my mom, like most of her friends went the complete opposite. I mean, the kids she grew up with, like, we're talking like as bad as it was in the 70s and 80s, like in Philly, like hardcore drug use. I mean, it was wild. So for her to look at my sister and I and realize like, I gotta do better for myself and for my family, for my kids. That changed the trajectory of my life. I mean, I don't know who I'd be today if she had made some of the decisions that she made, if my grandmother hadn't been there to make sure that she could support her. So I grew up, my mom became a nurse, an RN, and it's funny because she became a nurse. She told this story at her retirement party because of how badly she was treated by the nurse that delivered my sister. So this nurse sees a 16-year-old, mom, and the nurse actually said something to my mom like, this is what you get. Like, and my mom had to have a C-section, and the nurse said something like, now you're always going to have a C-section. Like, basically like you've ruined your life. And my mom made a decision at 16, I'm going to be a nurse one day and I'm never going to treat someone like this. Right. And one of the things my mom actually said that at her retirement party, which was full of other nurses, because my mom has worked at Temple, where she went to college. She's worked at that hospital, which is in the heart of North Philadelphia, which is a pretty rough section of Philly. She said that specifically because a lot of the nurses there probably treat patients. Like, I mean, you see the worst of it in North Philly. So she said that because she, it's still important for her today for no one to be treated like she was.
Yeah.
So she became a nurse, which was great because my sister and I got the opportunity to go to Temple for free.
Yeah.
So I got a free college education. So all these stories you hear about, like, what do I do with my student loans? I got $300,000. Like, I can't relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I did have to pay for college, I mean, Temple, when I went from 1996 to 2000, again, in the heart of North Philadelphia, I think my entire college degree would have cost me $20,000.
Yeah.
Like all 4 years. So, it's dirt cheap to go.
Yeah.
So what my mom's tuition reimbursement didn't pay for, I worked at a bank while I was in college as a bank teller. They paid my summer sessions because I had 2 majors and a minor. I wanted to do it all.
Yeah.
So my mom's tuition reimbursement didn't pay for everything. So I was picking up additional majors and a minor. So my job paid for what that didn't. So so I did that and became a licensed stockbroker right out of college. I mean, that was just kind of grace and fate and hard work. And I knew I was interested in all things money. I always have been. So became a broker in 2000, and I've been doing that since. And I've been just looking for opportunities to park some of the capital that I make in a pretty lucrative field.
You've done a pretty good job of that. We're going to get into that, but before we go further in there, is there something, and I usually ask this at the end, but is there something about your mom or your grandmother or you that did change the trajectory? I usually ask the question to people, is there something that happened early in your life that changed who you are today? Because I've done 180 of these episodes, and usually everybody's like, something happened early. And so what gave your mom that, or was it your grandmother, or how did it start?
I mean, it certainly started. My grandmother who we lost in May of 2019 was an amazing person.
Yep.
I mean, just an incredible woman.
Yep. Took care of everybody, loved everybody.
I mean, and was like insanely intelligent. Right?
Yep.
I mean, she just never went to college. I'm not even sure if my Nana graduated from high school, to be honest. And was just like incredibly intelligent.
Yeah.
And loved fiercely, right? And people underestimate the power of a loving family. I mean, that's a hack.
Yep.
Right. So so it started with my grandmother, of course, and then that passed to my mom, and I remember my own, how my life could have gone in a completely different direction. I mean, I grew up in South Philly, and my mom worked a lot. So by the time, we moved out of the projects, my grandmother was still living there. So we'd go and stay with her while we were younger kids. But when we became teenagers, we were, or even younger than teenagers, we were latchkey kids, right? My mom worked as a nurse. She worked 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So we had a lot of alone time, right? So being a kid growing up in South Philly, you start looking around and you're influenced by your community. And our heroes in my community in South Philly in the 80s, 90s were drug dealers, right? Like they had the most money. They had the nicest cars, and were great people. They were entrepreneurs, right? So those were the folks that I looked at and saw and had and formulated my own plan on how I was going to, because I was an entrepreneur in the making, and I was like, all right, like, so that's what they're doing. And then this person comes with the money, this person sells it. I was like, all right, I can figure that out. So I had a whole plan. I worked at McDonald's. That was my first job in high school. And I've always been a saver. Like, I mean, we're talking in the 90s, early 90s, I had like thousands of dollars saved, which for a kid, who wasn't given to me, I just saved it. Making $4.25 an hour. I mean, that was good money. So my plan was I was going to be the buyer. Like, I had the money, the capital. I was going to have like employees who would sell weed for me. And I remember we come up with a plan. I mean, I knew exactly how I was going to run my operation. I had different high schools, I had clientele. So I remember my mom comes into my room one night, and she's like, I don't know what you're thinking about doing. Don't do it. And I was like, what? Yeah. And she's like, I don't know if I've told her this. I've mentioned it on a few podcasts or interviews, but I don't know if I've ever told her, like, and I pretended, of course, that I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about? Like, because she was also very strict, right?
Yeah.
We grew up in a very Christian household. Like, we couldn't listen to a lot of secular music, and she was pretty strict. So when she said that to me, of course, to her, I pretended I had no idea what she was talking about, but I decided not to do it. And I just think, like, I mean, there are people today still incarcerated for weed charges. I mean, weed is not a big deal today. It's legal in a lot of states, but who knows how my life would have been different had I gone that route. Yeah. It's interesting because so many of us entrepreneurs have very similar stories. I mean, it's by hook or by crook, I'm gonna run and build a business.
Yep.
And for me, I go hard in everything. like I tell people all the time, thank God my life
That
didn't go
wasn't
that
it.
direction. Yeah, because I would have been Griselda Blanca. Like, I mean, I would like, it's go big or go home. Like, I would have started with weed, and then I would have like, oh no, this is chump change. I mean, I know I would have gone
Yep.
all the way and completely wrecked my life. So when for years I said I'm self-made.
Yeah.
That's arrogance. It's my own arrogance. I'm pretty arrogant. But I had to realize, like, no, you're not. You like think of all the women in your family and men in my family who helped shape and define and mold and pushed me in the right direction.
Yep.
Because I certainly wouldn't be where I am today if,
For sure.
yeah, on my own.
I mean, yeah. Well, all right. Well, let's move into like a little bit of money then, because you said money's been on the mind forever.
Yep.
Why has money always been on your mind? And then let's talk about what having money, and we can kind of get into mud to millions and things. What has that done for your life, and what is having that mentality? And did your mom put that in you, or is that your own hustle?
That is entirely me.
Okay.
No one in my family was or really is good with money.
Mm-hmm.
So like even as a kid, like I was what was that show? It was Family Ties. Remember Alex P. Keaton was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
He was like a young kid obsessed with money, and he was like my hero as a kid. I mean, I've always just been obsessed with, I can keep a buck. I'd get my allowance. I'd put it in a shoebox under my bed. Like, I don't need to spend it. My sister was like more fashion obsessed. She wanted the nicest clothes. I've never cared about those things.
Yep.
I've always kind of been like a Scrooge McDuck hoarder of money, right? Which is one of the reasons why, like, I donate pretty generously every year. A part of that is my upbringing. My mom taught us to tithe very early on.
Yep.
Right. Like, and I was faithful for years. 10% of my income goes to, at first it was churches, and now I make it more who's doing good in communities.
Yep.
And I still do that to this day. And I do that, one, because I believe in the principle of tithing, but also because I believe in giving, and I know how, like, it's mine, I can be, and that actually helps me as well to give, right?
Yep.
So that's always just been innate in me. So when I found a career in finance, that was just kind of second nature. And it was great because it taught me how to invest, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I was 21 or 22 when I became a licensed stockbroker. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, like, I passed the Series 7. I sat in these training classes, but you don't really learn until you're doing it, until you get burned. I mean, I remember my first investment was in a mutual fund, a technology mutual fund in like the late 90s, because I was like, oh, the technology's going crazy. I should be buying these .com mutual funds, right? And of course, subsequently lost like, 70% of my investment within like a year and a half or so. But so I learned trial by error on it's not enough. And I think I talk about this in my book. It's not enough just to be a saver, right?
Yep.
And that was like, I thought I could just save my way to millions.
Yep.
I mean, I wasn't at $4.25 an hour. I certainly wasn't making that much money. As a bank teller, I wasn't making that much. Even as a stockbroker early on in my career, it dawned on me, like, I'm not going to get there by just saving my money. So I've got to figure this out. How do I exponentially increase my wealth by having my money just work for me as much as I work for it, or if not harder.
You got to own some shit.
That you do.
That's like my favorite thing that you say.
Thank you. It's not mine. I don't know where I got it from originally, but it's so true. And our own experiences kind of govern how we invest, right? And one of the things I talk about quite a bit is when it comes to my love for real estate. I think some of the books I read early on, I was like a almost drug dealing nerd, right?
Yeah.
So I read a lot, and a lot of the books that I read, I can't remember the passage. Maybe it was Alice Walker, Toni Morrison. In some book I read, the author talked about, you're always going to need a place to, you're always going to need land. People need a place to live and a place to die. Both require land. And that kind of stuck with me. And then my mom, I tell this story. My mom sold our childhood house in, I think, 1998 or 1999.
Mm-hmm.
For a ridiculously low amount of money, right? She sold this house for, I think, $35,000 or $40,000. It was dirt cheap. And before she sold it, I told her, I said, Mom, don't sell this house, right? This is a gold mine. Like, I know it's rough now. I mean, it was a rough neighborhood. We called it Saigon, the neighborhood. It was such a rough neighborhood, but the proximity to downtown Philly, I mean, you could walk to downtown Philly. I mean, it was
Right
a great,
there.
great location. Yeah. So she was nervous. She sold the house because we were moving. We needed more space. She didn't want to have 2 mortgages. She's like, what if my tenant doesn't pay rent? I mean, it was all the fears that people have on keeping property. She sold it. I was in college and I was right? Sure enough, the property, I mean, it's worth at least 20x what it was when she sold it. And and went up like shortly after she sold it. I mean, it really sucked.
Yeah.
And for a while I was so angry about that. Like that was our inheritance, right? Like that was our legacy. That was our fortune. But in retrospect, I'm so glad it happened because that governed how I invest.
Yep.
Right. Like I hate selling things. Like I the hoarder I was as a child with my money under a shoebox, I became that times 10. Like, no, it's mine. Like that, if I buy something, I'm never getting rid of it. And that experience.
Why did she sell? Did she want the money or she just wanted a new house? Or?
She was scared. I mean, you think about it, and we've talked about this kind of offline.
Mm-hmm.
Had it dawned on me that I could have bought it. I mean, I was in college. I was working. I had that mortgage on a $35,000-$40,000 sale would have been what, $300 a month, $400, like nothing. So it was a cheap mortgage. Why she sold it, I think she was really just scared.
Yeah.
She had a tenant. We weren't living there right at the time. She had a tenant there and the tenant wanted to buy it.
Yep.
And she was nervous that if she didn't agree to selling it, that the tenant would say, all right, well, I'm leaving. Yep. And now you've got to pay the mortgage on your new place and this mortgage until you find another tenant.
Yep.
And that scared her.
Yep.
She was already like kind of living paycheck to paycheck. So I think the fear of having both mortgages was just more than she could stand.
You said early on when we were talking, you said the projects that you grew up in, they don't even exist anymore.
Yep.
And I'm going to one of Russell Lowry's questions from Twitter just about gentrification.
Yep.
Because I would say that's probably the case for a lot of areas that were kind of prolific maybe in the 80s, 90s. They no longer exist anymore. What do you think about it? Like, how does that impact you? And why is that? What is that project that you used to live in now? Is it?
They're building townhomes there. If they haven't already gone up, they're building them.
Yeah.
Gentrification. I think that to be clear, the displacement of people who grew up, are poor, and can no longer afford the communities they lived in, I hate it.
Yeah.
Right. At the same time, there's this. I mean, home ownership is one of the primary drivers of wealth in America.
Mm-hmm.
Right. My concern is people often take issue with a community, a Black community, evolving, growing, and developing.
Yep.
So if you got a predominantly Black community where there are predominantly Black owners, if home ownership is one of the primary drivers of wealth in the country, why would you want your neighborhood to stay devalued?
Right.
If you look at predominantly white communities, which are historically valued at higher values than Black communities, they are able to take equity out to put their kids through college, to buy other investments, take that capital equity from their properties and use it to exponentially increase their wealth.
Yep.
If our communities stay devalued, we don't have the opportunity to take that equity out and put our kids through college. It's one of the reasons why Black college graduates have a substantially high, I think it's like 46% higher student loan debt. So when you look at all the ways that our communities not increasing in value, how it hurts us,
yep.
That's a problem. So, we get to this point where in Black communities, we see development happening and we're against it. Development's coming whether you like it or not.
Right.
The key is to be a buyer.
Right.
To be an owner.
Yep.
To own some shit.
Own some shit, baby.
Right. So, when and I've been very vocal about a lot of this on social media for a long time. I mean, I go back to some of my 2010, 2011, 2012 Facebook and Instagram posts. I mean, I was talking about buying in communities that that everybody looked at me like nobody's going to want to live there. Like that's the ghetto. That's the hood. I mean, like Black people were like, there's I talk a lot about Black flight, right? So our brightest and most educated Black people leaving communities, like running from communities that we grew up in. And I get it, poverty is traumatizing, right? These communities that we grew up in, I mean, we've got a lot of trauma embedded in those streets. So we ran from them and didn't look back. So when I went back and realized, one, these communities that we come from still need development. They need us as Black owners. They need, when I was a kid growing up, before my mom bought her house, she rented. And the only landlord I knew was Mr. Mitch, a white guy, right?
Yep.
Like it never dawned on me as a kid that a Black woman could be a landlord.
Yep.
So when I go back to my communities, and I do all my own property management.
Yep.
My tenants, who are probably 95% Black,
Yep.
their kids see me, right? Like they see, that's Aeysha. She's mom's landlord, right?
Yep.
And a lot of my tenants want their kids to see, this is Aeysha. She's our landlord. She owns a lot of properties. I mean, they say it with such pride so that their kids will know, you can own some property. Yeah, like I love that shit, right?
So you're spreading that. Your message is more of that. Like, how do you stop the flight?
If nothing else, because I never want to tell people where they can live, where they can't live, and I understand that in most of these communities, the school system, the school districts are trash, right? You've got parents who are raising their kids, and I'm like, can your kids fight? Like, so I don't want to tell people where they should or have to live, but can we at least be investors in that community?
Yep.
Can we at least show ownership in those communities? Because it empowers people that live there.
Yep.
If she can own it, I can own it. I can buy a house in the same community. So as it pertains to gentrification, my concern is always us fighting gentrification to the extent that it hurts us to our own detriment.
Right.
We do want to see our property values elevate because at the end of the day, that helps us win.
Like you said, it helps with refinance.
Yep.
Or reinvest in the community. I mean, I see it, but I totally get a lot of the like you said, the projects were built next to downtowns.
Yep. Back
in the mid 1900s. So it's now that these cities are growing, it's like it's in the path of growth. How do you stay on it?
Yep.
That kind of gets into Mud to Millions and kind of your big message.
Yep.
How'd that all start?
I mean, money's always been something that has been a huge focus for me. And then once I kind of figured out how to be a disciplined investor, that was what was so difficult for me, because when you're when you're very anxious about money, you get greedy, you start making these decisions for like fast money, right? Like,
so like the world we're living in right now.
Basically. Yeah. Which I try to stay away from, right? NFTs, and like people are looking at me like I'm like Warren Buffett, like, no, I don't own any Bitcoin. Like, because I learned some disciplines early on that I won't deviate from. And I'm not saying that NFTs or digital currency don't make sense. I'm not saying that at all, but I developed very specific and clear disciplines for me that I try not to deviate from. I mean, for me, it's almost like someone who swore off of alcohol, like drinking again. Like I would go off the deep end.
Yep.
So once I developed my disciplines and I learned what worked for me, and by the time I hit 30, I hit my goal, which was to be worth at least $1 million, have a net worth of at least $1 million by the time I was 30. Then for me, I wanted to tell everybody, like, y'all can do this, because for most young people, most Black people, most brown people, we don't have someone who looks like us and talks like us or sounds like us,
right.
Teaching how to do these kinds of things. So that's why it was important for me. Even though I was working a lot, it was important for me, at least when social media came out. It's like, all right, this is great. I can like blast out, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. This is where I'm doing it. These are, I can't talk on socials very much about like my stock stuff, just because, with my licenses, I can't give specific advice via social media. But that's why I went very heavy. It's like I talk a lot about my real estate stuff because I want people to know that there are ways where you can own things. And I know capitalism is such a big concern in the Black community because it has been to our detriment historically. But there are other things that you can own. If you're against owning shares of a corporation, own some real estate, own some art. There are a variety of different things. Own some digital currency. You can own things that fit within your moral compass. The reality is you have to own something because if you don't, you're not going to have the opportunities from access to great healthcare, access to good legal counsel. I mean, there are so many reasons why having wealth in this country matters.
Yep.
So it was important for me just based on my experiences growing up and even still investing in the hood and seeing what happens in Black communities, predominantly Black communities. It was important for me to push that message out there.
Yep.
So it started with social media and then burgeoned into courses and classes and books and just making sure that I could send that message out.
Is there a story that comes to mind of somebody that took your course or listened and where they are today?
You know what? I get so many DMs and emails about like, hey, I've been following you since 2011 or 2012 on Facebook or Instagram. And I've got like X number of properties now, and you have no idea how you've changed or impacted my life. I mean, it's like humbling. Like sometimes I'm in my DMs and my emails like crying. Like, so it's cool.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, it really is cool.
How when you were talking about like how was money talked when you were growing up? How was money perceived in your world? Or explain to me like how money played a role in your life, and then maybe like the broader community, just to get a sense of like the challenges you have to overcome to want to be involved with money and wealth and everything else.
No, bro, I learned about money watching Trading Places, the movie.
Yeah.
That was like, no, we didn't talk about money. There was no, I was the barterer in the house. Like my mom would always like let her friends who were recovering addicts like stay with us for a while. So I was like a barterer, right? Where I had chores, I had to do my dish. Like I learned about money, like paying my Uncle Woody, like to do my dishes.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'll go buy you some Lucy's from the corner store, like some cigarettes to like do my dishes. Like that's how I learned money. I mean, watching television, watching movies like Trading Places, Wall Street. I mean, that was kind of the extent of what we learned, like what I learned about money as a kid. Like in most of our communities, it wasn't like a conversation that we had. My mom was really good about giving us an allowance or rewarding good behavior, like in school, like good grades.
Yeah.
I remember she would, I think we got like $10 an A, $5 a B on a report card. So I'd load up.
Yeah.
And my mom was great with knowing, because our school was, our grades were very important to her. My mom was great about knowing what incentivized us. Like she knew how important money was to me.
Yep.
I got nothing for a C. Like you bring a C home, my mom's like, why didn't you tell me you needed tutoring? I'm like, but my friends got D's and their parents are happy they didn't fail.
Yeah.
So that was probably the extent of learning money at home. And then once I started working as a bank teller, like that, working as a bank teller in college was probably one of the best eye-opening experiences for me, because you get to place a person with their bank accounts.
Right.
Right. And that was like super eye-opening for me. Like it would be the person who'd walk in like super lavish.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, oh, they are loaded.
And
right?
then you'd see their bank.
And then you'd see their bank accounts like overdraft. Like they're putting in money to get back to zero.
Yep.
I'm like, damn, sis, that's how you living, right? Like no one, and just you and I know, we make that eye contact, like, wow, girl, like, you need to get it together. Or the person who would walk in like looking like me, right? And I'd be, initially I'd be thinking like, oh, you poor little thing. I went to the bank. I have one of my multi-units, has a coin-operated machine in the basement. So I had like a whole bunch of coins I had to take into the bank. And when I like walk through, I look good today, right?
Yeah.
Compared to how I normally look. So I walk in the bank and I've got like a bunch of change, like all, just kind of like, and I'm like, some of it's rolled, and I got like, and the girl looks at me like, like, bless her heart. And she's like, how long did it take you to get all this? And I was like, well, I got a machine,
A week.
Yeah. So she, like I just looked at her face when she like made the deposit and saw the balance.
Yep.
And she looked at me like, we made eye contact, and I'm like,
yeah.
So that was an eye-opening experience for me. And then when I started working as a financial advisor, it was that times 10, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where I started to see real wealth. And again, the folks who weren't very materialistic, and that was great that was a good confirmation for me, because I've never been into that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And as my life evolves today, I'm just moving to a different level now. Those things are still not important to me.
Yeah.
Like Birkin bags. I hear they appreciate in value. That's just not important to me. I'd rather pay that amount for a piece of art.
Yep.
So those are different things that just kind of help me learn about money. And then of course I'd read a lot of books. As a new financial advisor, I worked at the time when I started out of college, the company was American Express Financial Advisors. We spun off and became a different company, but we had a pretty good leadership program because they were hiring a bunch of like 22-year-olds out of college. So they put us through a pretty rigorous curriculum. So we had to read books like Who Moved My Cheese and Think and Grow Rich and The Millionaire Next Door, all those books that like affirmed all the things that I just kind of like had thought in my head made sense. But it was pretty cool to see it in practice.
And for somebody that's like totally broke, and your first two steps are change your mindset, cut your expenses.
Mm-hmm.
When you say change your mindset, and I haven't read the book yet, what is change your mindset? Cutting expenses seems more obvious, but when you're telling someone change your mindset, what are they changing?
So it's really just how you think about money, right?
Yeah.
There's some of us that think like money is just something like I'm just thinking of like different ways to spend.
Yep.
Right. So I get money to spend it.
Yep.
That's just literally how most people think. Like, all right, you give me $1,000. Great. What could $1,000 buy me?
Yep.
So I think the root of building wealth starts with when I get $1, when I get $1, when I get $1,000. If you gave me 100,000 today, what is this for? Right. Most people, I don't think, have the mindset that money should be used to buy my freedom. I tweeted something the other day, and I try to keep my social media content relatively simple and easy to understand.
Yep.
I tweeted something the other day that, like how could you not essentially be paying yourself first, right? Most people work a 9 to 5 and they hate their jobs.
Yep.
Right. So imagine you work 40 hours a week for a boss you hate, a job you hate, next to coworkers you hate. Imagine going through all of that, putting yourself through all that, and you don't pay yourself first.
Right.
Right. Most people are thinking, I get that paycheck, and now I can figure out, and if I got extra money, how can I figure out like what else to buy?
Yep.
If you don't change that first, it doesn't matter how much you make.
Yep.
Right. Like you could make 50,000. If you don't change your mindset, you're going to be poor. You can make 100, like a double your pay. If you don't change your mindset, you're still going to be poor. So it doesn't. None of the other stuff matters.
Yep.
Until you're thinking, how can I use this to essentially bridge my way to freedom?
Yep. It's like you just said, there's people that are worth $1 million a year that are poor. They got everything is out the door. Like so many Americans live their life. How much more am I making? I can get one more payment going now.
Yep. Lifestyle inflation. Yeah.
It's quicksand, man.
Yeah. And working I work in personal finance. I see it.
Yep.
I see people who make 100,000 a year can save more than people who make $1 million a year. It's their mortgage is ridiculous. The private school educations are ridiculous. The car payments are ridiculous. Like you spend that in clothes, God. Like,
yeah.
So I'm not going to say income doesn't matter. I mean,
Yeah.
it certainly helps if you can exponentially increase your income, which is one of the things I talk about, because that helps exponentially increase your wealth. If you can figure out how to keep your lifestyle modest,
Yep.
then if you can cut your expenses and increase your wealth simultaneously while having the mindset, I mean, that's how you really blow it out of the water.
That's how you get going.
I mean, that's what I did. I mean, I was able to essentially keep my lifestyle relatively low for a very long time. My expenses were super low, and then my income just kept like jumping. I mean, like my income, like I became a franchise owner in 2014. So I went from our employee channel within my company to the franchise. My income like shot up.
Yep.
Most people in that increase would have gotten bigger house, bigger car, bigger dog, bigger everything, right? Bigger cat. Like, what the hell's that? So like literally people get bigger cats. Like they've got these like little tigers in the house. Like, but I stayed in this exact same apartment in Philly. My rent stayed the same. Like I'm still turning out lights.
And what'd you do with all that money?
I parked it in real estate.
Yeah.
Most of it. I mean, I max out a retirement plan, a workplace retirement plan every year. But then, so the good news is in my backyard, I could buy properties cheap in Philly. So, I mean, I was racking up between 2011 and 2018. I was just buying as much as I possibly could in Philly. Not enough. I mean, in retrospect, I should have been leveraging more. I mean, who knew?
Yeah. Were you paying cash for everything?
For the most part. So early on from 2011 until 2014, when I was still in the employee channel, my income wasn't as high. I was taking loans. I was doing the BRRRR method.
Yeah. What's that?
That's the BRRR, so the buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and then repeat. So essentially I was leveraging. But once 2014 came, I was almost all cash. And then I started paying off a lot of the mortgages that I was taking between 2011 and 2014.
So when you got in, what set the stage? What was the market like? Again, we had just gone out of 08, 09. Yep.
So I bought my first property in 2002.
Okay.
Right. That was my first house.
Hell yeah.
And I bought it. Great neighborhood. I still own it.
You don't sell really.
I really, yeah. There are a couple that got away.
Yeah.
And I think of them longingly. One day I was driving by and saw a house I sold, and I just kind of sat there for a while. Like the owner was probably looking out the window like a weirdo. So I bought this place in 2002. It was my intention because I was living with my mom. So I graduated from college. I was working as a new broker. And again, great mom. Like my mom wasn't really like, she didn't want anything from me. Like if I'm 43 today, if I was living at home with my mom, she would like love it. Like
yeah.
She's got a room for me always.
I love it.
So my intention was to buy this place, staying at home, working as a broker. I was going to buy it and then rent it. So I was going to be a landlord, staying at like second floor bedroom, right?
Yeah.
And then I found out like last minute, like, hey, this is it's an owner occ type situation. I have to move in. So my mom was like crying. I'm crying. So I ended up buying it, and then I house hacked. So I got a roommate who paid for basically all of the mortgage.
Yep.
So I held that property. I bought another rental property in 2004, and then I moved to Virginia for work in 2004. And so I just had tenants and dealt with being a landlord long distance, which was fine. And then the market crashed in 2008, 2009. And then it really kept going down in Philly for a while, and it bottomed probably right around 2010, 2011.
Okay.
And it was hard to get financing. It was hard. Like there weren't a lot of wholesalers out there. There weren't like the market. It was like tumbleweed. Right.
Yep.
So I took a home equity line of credit from that first house I bought in 2002. So we're talking from 2002. Now it's 2011.
Yeah.
So 9 years had passed. I had a bunch of equity in it. The house was either paid off or almost paid off. I took a HELOC, a $54,000 HELOC, and I was scared. Like we didn't know. Like, is that it? Like, is this thing gonna keep dropping? Like, are we at the bottom? I just knew that there wasn't a lot of competition to buy this one house in South Philly. So going back to my story of where I lived, that house my mom sold, I couldn't afford there by 2011. It was already expensive.
Yeah.
So I just went a little further south. Like, what can I afford here? No, it's still expensive. A little further south. And I got to Washington Avenue, which is like a big divide in South Philly.
Okay.
And everyone was like, don't go south of Washington. Like, girl, that is the ghetto.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, wait, so 1 block north of Washington is fine, but 1 block south of Washington, like, don't go. And they're like, exactly.
Like, I'm going south.
I'm like, you guys are idiots. Like, there's no like physical barrier. There's no moat. There's no canal that's stopping people. Eventually, I will be in the wave. So I went south of Washington. That first property I bought, I added a little bit of money out of my pocket for the acquisition and did a very light cosmetic renovation. Bought the house and then got a tenant in it. A really cool tenant. I met her grandmother. I felt really good about her. And then I took a loan against it because I paid cash for it. I took a loan against it. My tenant, of course, paid my rent plus some. I paid my mortgage plus some. And I took the money that I got from the loan and I went around the corner and I did the exact same thing. And then same thing. And then I took a loan against that one. And then I bought another house back on the first block that I bought a house. I mean, I literally just kept doing it over and over and over.
Yeah.
You know? And I was like, hey, this is easy. And then at some point, I started noticing the prices were creeping up. And then I was like, maybe we were at the bottom because then, there started to be more buyers. Banks started easing up on financing. Prices started getting a little crazier. And then I got priced out of that neighborhood. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, now, great. I need another neighborhood. So I just started looking for different parts of Philadelphia where it just didn't make sense to me, either based on a hospital nearby or a college nearby or great access to transportation. You can get into the city very quickly. I started looking for different parts of Philly that it just didn't make sense, that it was depressed. So I started buying. And when I went franchise in 2014, my income exponentially increased. And I'm like, well, I could go ball out, or I could take this and park this in some real estate. So I started,
which is balling out,
which is basically balling out, right? Yeah. I was broke, but had assets.
Yeah.
So that's how I started building a pretty decent sized real estate portfolio, which is great for cash flow. I mean, I don't have loans on most of my buildings. And it's crazy because now that there's a massive single family home shortage. So I was mostly buying single families early on. And then I started buying small multis, 2 units to 4 units, towards the back end of that. But like my single families that were in like my most questionable hoods.
Yeah.
I remember in one neighborhood, I was paying like $8,500, $6,500. Having to reno them, of course, but like paying almost nothing for the house. They're now appraising for close to $200,000, $175,000, $180,000.
That's awesome.
Which is just silly to me. Like,
and you were buying them for what? 10,
I,
15, 20, 25?
Less. Yeah. I mean, it's just silly to me.
Yeah.
So fortunately I was buying when I was buying. In retrospect, I should have been financing to the hilt and had
buying everything.
Yeah, buying everything I possibly could.
If we could see tomorrow, we wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Monday morning quarterback is easy to.
That's it, baby.
Yeah.
Hindsight's 2020.
Yep.
So, how do you think about it then? Right now, your properties are worth probably more than they've ever been worth as long as this earth has been around.
Yep.
We're at all-time highs.
Yep.
But you've got cash flow.
Yep.
I could sit here today and say, well, the market could crash tomorrow. You should have sold yesterday because you could buy it back for. So how does that go through your head? Because we talked about this on Twitter this morning. I said, we're going to chat about it. You said hold forever.
Mm-hmm.
So if it goes down 30%, how do you think about that? As long as the cash flow stays good?
All I care about is cash flow.
Yeah.
I never bet on appreciation.
Yeah.
I mean, if I did, I wouldn't have been investing in Philly. I would have been in LA or New York or DC. Appreciation, because it's not certain, it's not guaranteed. Run me money through cash flow.
Right.
That's all I really care. Like even now when I'm trying to structure my deals, I'm like, well, what's the cash flow look like? They're like, well, we could pay you this up front. Nah.
Yeah.
Just give it. Like, I like a good old monthly check.
Yeah.
Like a quarterly check is just fine. We're good. And that's I've always, like, recurring revenue. In my career, recurring revenue is a big thing. I get paid on assets that I've been managing for dozens of years at this 20 years at this point, 21 years at this point. Not dozens, but a couple decades. So recurring revenue, when that notion hit me, like as an asset manager, I'm like, this is like underrated.
Yep.
The ability to just get paid on an asset over and over, like that is what appeals to me. I don't need lump sums of money. I'd much rather bet on something paying me over time.
Yep.
So if the market does pull back 20 or 30%, it sucks because it bruises my ego. I'd be like, oh, I'm poor,
Yeah.
So, but as long as my cash flow is good. And that's always why I was always very nervous about a lot of leverage, right? I would be nervous if the market pulled back 30% or something crazy. I'd be nervous if my building is now worth less than what I owe on it.
Yeah.
Because then I feel like if the shit hits the fan, I can't even sell this thing. Like I am in trouble.
Yep.
That to me is trouble. So one of the reasons why, especially early on, even when I was refinancing, doing the cash out refinances, I was like, 50, 60%. I don't like no tricky business here.
Yeah.
So it's always scary to me, the idea of being underwater. So that's the only way I would be a little nervous about a big pullback. But since most of my buildings are not even leveraged,
you just don't even think about it.
No.
That's awesome.
And most of my rents, and a lot of investors would argue about this, but a part of my investing is also social impact.
Right.
Most of my rents are below fair market value.
Yeah.
So even if rents dropped, mine wouldn't. I'm probably where they dropped to.
Right.
So,
well, let's talk about that for a second. You could charge more.
Mm-hmm.
You don't.
Mm-hmm.
What's the social impact?
Not displacing people who grew up in a community is important to me.
Yep.
Right.
So the majority of your tenants have been in the neighborhood for a long time.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, I could charge more for my units. And I don't for one. I want to make sure that people who, I mean, they're not cheap. People call me all the time, like, you got a 3-bedroom for $750. No,
yeah,
I do not. But they're still well below where I could go.
Yep.
So I put a lot of quality work into my units. It's important to make sure that I put quality products in the communities I serve. But I also I don't like turnover. Right? Like
yep.
The 2 months without rent, and then I gotta paint. I gotta replace the carpet. So I don't want to do all that.
Yep.
And because I do most of my management on my own, so I save on the management fee.
Yep.
My tenants tend to stay a long time, which is another reason why I like single families.
Yep.
Right. My apartments, like I turn those things over constantly. My 3 bedrooms, I think the neighbors probably think my tenants own them.
Yeah.
Like they stay. And because I don't knock them over the head with rent increases, I generally increase rents when my costs go up.
Yep.
So blame the city of Philadelphia and that tax hike if your rent went up. But for the most part, I tend to leave my tenants. I leave them alone.
They stay longer. You don't have turnover. You don't have a ton of CapEx and maintenance work.
Yep.
And I would imagine by them being able to save a couple $100 a month or whatever, they can do better things with that money that ultimately help the whole area.
Generally, when they leave, it's you've been a great landlord, the best landlord. I'm going to buy a house. I mean, that's generally. Awesome. I mean, and that like it sucks for me because it's like, damn it, you're leaving. You've been there, 8 years. So like, I gotta really like do some work in this property. But I mean, it's awesome. Like you're leaving my place to go buy a place, which meant that you could save.
Yeah.
Because the rent wasn't killing you.
We don't have to talk about it too much, but we have to talk about one of your real estate projects.
Okay.
That you did over the internet basically for a year.
Yeah.
In LA.
Yep.
How'd you find the deal? Why'd you go to LA? You designed a knockout kick-ass house. What was going on there?
So, I've always loved Southern California since I was a kid. And it's dawning on me later, like, where did this stuff come from in my head? I was watching, my sister told me, she's like, remember you used to love Jackie Collins novels? I was like, you're right, I did. She's like, there's a documentary on Netflix about her. And so I'm watching the documentary, and one of her first books was Hollywood Wives or something like that. And I'm like, I love that book. Is that why I loved it? I mean, I was like hiding from my mom at 14, reading Jackie Collins' Smut, which largely talked about these neighborhoods. And I'm like, oh, these people are living. Like, so I remember going to LA the first time, and I think it was like right out of college or a couple years as a new broker, and I was like, I like it here. Like, even their hoods look nice. Like, we're in the hood, like with palm trees. So I remember like making a commitment then, like, I'm gonna have a place here at some point. So let me just go back to a cheap city, Philly, and stack some bread, like a lot of bread. And when I feel like I've stacked enough bread, I'll come and buy something here. So in 2018-ish, 2018, 2019, I was finishing up on a 4-unit building that I did all cash. And I was like, you know what? These rent payments are sufficient for me to buy a place in Cali. That would pay a Cali mortgage for me. Yeah. So I'm going to dedicate this building in the hood to buying the place that I made a commitment to myself many, many moons ago. So I didn't know, but I didn't know LA. I mean, I'd stayed out there, mostly hotels. I knew I couldn't afford. I love the Beverly Wilshire. So I knew I couldn't afford around there, right? Like right on Rodeo. So I went online. It's always important for me to hire Black and brown realtors, mortgage people, like, because no one looks for us, right? So I look for us.
Right.
So I found an agent, and I've got a lot of friends that live in LA. That was also important because I got boots on the ground. I'm all the way in Philly, so I need to make sure I've got folks who can watch my projects. So I found an agent, talked to my friend, like, what community? The three of us went to lunch, like, where should I be looking? So in my head, like, I like weird people. Yeah. I like walkable. So in my head, I'm like, all right, for like 1.2 million, can I get like 2,500 square feet in WeHo? I'd like a pool in the back. I'd like, I had like this whole list, and they're looking at me like, are you crazy? Like, no, you can't get that here. So my friend Eric, who ended up designing the place for me, he's like, I've got the perfect neighborhood for you. So he actually showed me to a couple neighborhoods: View Park, Baldwin Hills, Leimert Park, Ladera Heights, which are all predominantly affluent Black neighborhoods, which I'd never seen anything like in the country. I'd certainly never seen anything like that in Philly. I mean, in Philly, predominantly Black communities, you're in a predominantly Black community. Right. I mean, it's not developed. It's rough. Yep. I'd never seen anything like View Park, Baldwin Hill. I mean, I'm like, these Black people are living. Yeah. I mean, it's like a hill of Huxtables. Yeah. Like you're standing outside your house, neighbors walk up, hi, I'm a UCLA professor. My wife's a UCLA professor. Like, we're so happy to have you in the neighborhood. Like, I'm like, are you guys kidding? Like, what? Where am I? Right. So bought the house. At the end, I offered end of 18, closed February 2019. It took about a year to get permits, and all my plans approved and all that stuff. And then everything was approved March 2020. So
perfect timing. Yeah.
So we started the build. Fortunately, construction didn't stop there. Yeah. Fortunately, my framing was done before lumber prices escalated, because we basically tore the house down. Yeah. And built it back.
Which wasn't the original plan.
That was not the plan. Yeah. No. But in retrospect, I guess I should have known that was the plan when I was like, well, I want vaulted ceilings. I want 20 feet extra on the master. I want to push the middle of the house out. I want to enclose steps that are, so I should have known that we were basically tearing the house down. But it's been a process. It's been a costly process.
It's a beautiful home.
It's my mom came out, she retired, and then came and spent 3 weeks with me. And she's like, you showed me the pictures and videos. I had no idea it was this beautiful. And most of the finished work happened while I was in Philly. Yeah. When I came there the first time, when I tell you pictures and videos just don't do it any justice. My mom, and I was like, is it just me? Like, my mom said the exact same thing. It's incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Has our friend Moses come out to visit yet?
He hasn't. He's certainly welcome and invited.
Moses, if you're listening.
Yeah, he's invited. Moses is absolutely invited. I'll see him at Reconvene. You come in to Reconvene?
Yeah, I'll be at Reconvene.
You're welcome to come over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to have you guys over.
I'd love it.
Yeah, we're still working on the outside. There's a couple things on the inside that we're still working on, but it's beautiful.
Are you going to try and do business? Is LA for pleasure? Do you want to do business out there and buy out there? And cheap in LA is like,
I don't really get I get the values increase ridiculous. I mean, like my value left untouched would have probably been worth 150, 200,000 more than what I paid for it.
Yep.
2 years ago. The numbers out there, like for long-term rentals, I mean, I can make, again, I focus on cash flow, not appreciation.
Yeah.
Because if the appreciation, like if nothing ever increased again, I don't want to, I'm okay. I want to be okay with cash flow.
Yeah.
So I actually don't know. I saw one of the questions, like kind of what's next for me? What's my next move?
Yeah.
LA was actually the last property I purchased because in Philly, by 2018, a bunch of New York investors started coming in, and I was like, "Oh, we are at the top! Like this is it!" Like, I'm such a nervous investor. Like, like everything, like it's gonna blow. So I stopped buying like dummy, like thinking, we have to be at the top. We were not at the top. So what's next for me? I do a net worth review twice annually.
Okay.
I started in May, finalize it in June.
How do you do it?
How do I do it?
Yeah.
I mean, I basically go through all of my brokerage accounts.
Okay.
Cash accounts that I don't use fluidly. Debt that's not like credit cards I pay off each month. And for properties, I do like a rough but conservative estimate based on recent comps.
Yep.
And it takes me a bit of time to kind of go through because I'm sometimes asking friends who are agents send me comps for neighborhoods. So it takes me a little while. I start at usually early May, like right around my birthday, May 5th.
Yep.
And it's usually done by June 30th. And then the same for November into December. And it's kind of cool for me because it gives me right as I'm having a birthday, how have you grown over a year? And then as we're transitioning into a new calendar year, have you grown year over year? So my last one, December, was like a smidge shy of that number, right? Like, that number I like years ago, I set a net worth goal for myself. I said I had 5 million in net worth. I'm like, I'm done. I'm out of here.
Blew through that.
Because, and it dawned on me, like, as a financial advisor, CFP, I'm always thinking, what can I get if I'm pulling off 4%, right? 5 million, 4%, 200 grand a year. Right? Like, I need about 12,000 a month to wake up in LA.
Yeah.
Right.
To wake up.
Right. I'm not having a good time.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm grocery shopping.
Yeah.
With, my dog is fed. Our needs are met.
Yeah.
11, 12,000 a month. So when I started thinking 200 grand, that ain't enough.
No.
So then I had to, increase that number quite a bit. And I'm like kind of there.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And you're 43.
I'm 43. Right?
You got a long way to go.
Yeah. So the question, what's next? I'm like, do I God bless and good night at this point? Or do I? So a friend texted me not long ago, like, is your goal to be a billionaire? I'm like, no. Like, and maybe if you'd asked me in my 20s when I was like spitfire grinding, like,
yeah,
maybe. I was on I'm doing a call with the top Black advisors in my company. And one of them said something like, I attribute the fact that I will not be outworked to my success. And I've said that a gazillion times over my career, right? Like, you just wouldn't outwork me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm gonna outwork you. Like, and I had to as a young Black advisor woman, in a predominantly white male dominated industry, that had to be my mantra. Yeah. Right. So when he said that, I was like, ugh, still? Like, that's where you are. At 43, I don't have the grind in me anymore to like, you know how much it would, how much I'd have to work to get to $1 billion. Like, you know, a seasoned billion is exponentially higher than, you know, young millions, right? Like, and I don't think that a lot of people realize that's a massive difference.
But the truth of the matter is you're only 43. If you just let the world play out for 50 more years, you've seen Warren Buffett's chart. It's like,
This is true. This is true. You know what? The compounding interest would have to do the work for me because I don't have it in me. I want to enjoy, and that's a part of the challenge of hitting it hard. And one of my tweets that went viral back in 2019 that I got quite a bit of flack for was basically that I sacrificed all of my 20s and even some of my early 30s, like working 60 to 80 hours every single week consistently. Yeah. I mean, I hit it hard just to have the flexibility to make the decisions that I have today. Yep. Like, do I just, I mean, I could just, all right, I'm done. Like, yeah. And live well.
And that's something that drives me crazy when bust your ass in your 20s and 30s gets flack on Twitter or social media.
Yep.
It's not the people that have done it that are always giving shade to it. It's the people that aren't willing to do it and are still pissed that they're not where they're at.
Sure.
You have to bust your ass. I mean, look, I'm 34 years old. I've got more gray hair than most people. Every single one of these is like a sleepless night.
Understood. Yeah.
But I hate when people are just dissing on that. It is the way to get there. You have to outwork your competition or you have to win the genetic lottery. It's one or the other.
Yep. And the crazy thing is, like, and I got so much flack about it. I never told anyone, like, you go do. That's what I did. It worked. You did. It worked for me. So what's next? I don't know.
Are you gonna run for politics?
So the guy who was running against
your
the California
message is so damn powerful.
You know, but I hate politicians.
Oh, I know. I do too.
Yeah, I hate them all.
I don't trust them.
And I often wonder, were you always a trash human being, Mr. and Mrs. Politician, or did politics make you a trash human being? Like, so I saw a clip of the guy running against the California governor. I saw a clip where he'd said something silly, like, you know, about never running for politics. And I was like, well, that was stupid to say. So I probably shouldn't say that kind of thing because who knows? But no desire right now.
Yeah.
It's a thankless job and you get a lot of flack for it. And I don't want to become or evolve into a trash human being.
So how are you going to keep getting is the goal to keep getting your message out there?
Yeah. I mean, I will always educate.
Yeah.
I'll always educate. I mean, I'll have more time to educate if I'm doing less.
Yep.
I've got a few more buildings left to renovate. I got one building in Philly that the neighbors are giving me flack. I'm trying to get it zoned from single family into a 5-unit, and I got the NIMBYs from hell giving me flack on that. So I've got 3 more buildings that I've been just procrastinating on that I need to get done. And then after that, I mean, I'll have great cash flow and a place in LA and
come to Texas. The water's warm down here.
Is it?
Start investing in Texas.
You know, it's funny because I do like it here. I do like. I mean, the people are great.
Nice.
And I get it. Like I was at breakfast this morning, and I think people take for granted, like. You look around, there were a couple of tables of like business meetings going on and just Black people like doing well.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you look at this shit. Like, y'all living here. Like, I love to see it. I mean, and people take that for granted. I mean, maybe it happens a lot in other places, but, you know, I'm always utterly fascinated. And not to say that, like, you know, in Philly, we're all shooting each other, but, you know, when I go to cities where I see Black people thriving, I love it.
Yeah.
When I go to DC and it's like every club is like a scene out of Boomerang. I'm like, this is just the most beautiful shit I've ever seen in my life. So I don't know. I don't know what's next.
Yeah.
We'll see.
How do we get rid of the NIMBYism? Like, how does this end? Because there's so much potential to create more affordable housing, do a lot of cool shit. and we just can't seem to get out of our own ways. Actually, Moses, we'll bring him up for the second time, posted something today about how politicians are like, we can't get 50 more units on this property. And then another politician asks why, and he's like, because we said so.
I don't know what you do about crazy people. I don't.
The internet gives them a voice too.
It does, and it. On one hand, they will argue about like there's no affordable housing.
Yeah,
like literally on this in the zoning meeting, this guy's like arguing about the fact that like there's not enough affordable units, but no, we don't want you to convert this single family into a 5. I'm like, and I like. I don't know what to do about that. Like, I argued my point. I argued, I remember like, having friends in college who were looking for cheap housing in this neighborhood, but couldn't find 1 or 2 bedroom apartments, because you're an NIMBY. Like, so I don't know what that solution is.
Yeah.
Other than investors being more vocal about the benefits.
Yep.
FinTwit, real estate Twitter, we get a lot of flack, and sometimes understandably.
Yeah. I've been a dipshit on there many, many times.
Me too.
Yeah. It's fine.
Me too. Yeah. No,
we're real.
Yeah,
we're human.
Yeah. No, and especially I've tried to like stop fighting with people on Twitter because I'm the one you say something, like slightly snarky to, and I go ballistic. like I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me. So I think that we can probably also do a better job at not just being assholes.
Yeah.
And helping people understand the value that additional units bring to a community.
Yep. All right. Let's have some personal questions, and then you've been really generous. I've got 5 or 6 more for you.
Okay.
All right, March 2020. Now we're here in August 2020 or September 2021 now. Well, you've been in the market now for 20 something years.
Yep.
What has the last 18 months taught you about the world? Are you as confused as anybody else, or like, how do you see the world differently?
I never imagined like something like this could happen.
Yep.
I never, to me, it's all still very surreal.
Yep.
I'll walk into a room and see everyone in masks. Like, I can't believe this is happening to us.
Yep.
Like, it is surreal. And I've gone through so many phases of, it's not happening to, like this is all just a joke to we'll be fine to we're all going to die.
Yeah.
To, I've gone through every phase or like the entire economy is going to collapse. Like how are businesses going to remain shuttered? I've got friends who've been out of work since March of 2020. I've got friends who are like terrified.
Yep.
I know people who've lost. It's been a challenge to say the least.
Yeah.
I've been in my own ruts.
Yeah.
I even noticed like myself in social media. There are days I've got my draft folder is toxic. Like, the things that I never tweeted, like just in this last 18 months of like, I'm over this shit. Like, I don't want to do anymore. Like, I'm like, there's all of that in my drafts.
You delete 90% of your tweets.
Oh my gosh. Or I just put them in the draft.
Yeah,
maybe I can
I do too.
Later I can look at like how I was feeling.
Yeah.
And I think I lost a bit of my own discipline too.
Yeah.
Not so much with investing. Although I did get a little crazy when the market was going crazy in 2020 specifically, but just some of my own personal disciplines I lost. Some of it because my habits were disrupted.
Yeah.
Gyms were closed. I mean, I used to hit the gym every morning at 5 a.m. So when gyms were closed for like a year in Philly,
yep.
I lost some of that. And that's now what I'm trying to get back.
Yep.
I'm my heaviest I've been in probably 15 years. So like I've got to like
get back at it,
get back into that. So I need to do a little bit more like reading and meditating and personal mantras to kind of to get myself back to where I know I need to be.
Yep. And in the financial markets, are we in uncharted territory or? Like, what do you even think about that?
I think it's wild that the markets are as high as they are.
Yeah.
I'm not a contrarian.
Yeah.
I'm not like one of those people tweeting last year, New York City's dead, urban markets are dead.
Yeah. You left that to me.
Was that you?
No, I'm kidding.
I was going to tweet the other day, but I didn't want to be a jerk. Like, what happened with that? Like, my apartment building in downtown Philly has one vacant unit.
Yep.
Are urban markets dead? Like, do the other people in my building know? So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're all. My answer is I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's strange that the equities markets are as high as they are. I mean, if you take into consideration like the massive supply constraints, like this is not good.
Yeah.
Every day, there's like a record breaking number of container ships stuck off the coast. I mean, like all of these just wild things that have been happening. I mean, we've gone through a lot in the last 18 months, everything from the pandemic and the variants of the virus to the ship being stuck in the canal. I mean, to now there's 56 container ships, I think I read, stuck off of the coast of Southern California. Like these massive hurricanes, like footage of Philadelphia. I was in LA, footage of Philadelphia are one of our main expressways, literally underwater, which I've never seen in my 43 years of life. Like all of this in 18 months. I'm like, what's happening?
Yeah. Can we get a break just a little bit?
Just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, the ships off the coast of LA is nuts. And like I've been trying to buy a car for the last 4 months. I can't, like it might be another year before what I want is even available.
That's why I'm watching this. Like selfishly, that's the only reason I'm really paying attention to the ships off the coast. I think my car is still somewhere. I like watch the ship online, but it's somewhere like coming up towards Mexico now. So it's going to be probably one of the 70 ships stuck by the time it gets up there.
Yep. I was on Twitter yesterday. Somebody said, I'm in the meat industry or the beef industry. And all I can tell you is start buying as much beef as you can because it's about to run out. And I'm like,
wow.
Damn.
Wow.
It's crazy.
It's very crazy and scary. So the fact that stock market's making money and, like, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But
it's weird.
It is.
All right. How can the Fort listeners spread the mud to millions message?
Read the book.
Okay.
It's available on Amazon, Mud, the number 2 millions. It's also available, like, if you want to read it really quick. And it's a very fast read.
Yep.
It actually, it started out as a compilation of a tweet I did. Yeah. So I did the 7 steps. And it got so much traction. And a buddy of mine was like, you should just flush this out a bit. This is like a really powerful message. So, I mean, you can in hours read the entire thing, start to finish.
Okay. So no excuses.
No excuses. Yeah. So it's on Amazon. There's also a digital copy, on my website, mud2millions.com, and it's the number 2.
Okay. Well, you kind of just said what your morning routine is, but do you have a morning routine? Most successful people have something that gets them going during the day.
Pre-pandemic,
yeah.
I'd wake up super early, hit the gym. I'd go to Home Depot. I'd look at like get ideas for like properties or pick up stuff or, get stuff that I needed.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, I'm like, gin and tonic.
Yeah.
In the morning. Just kidding. Just kidding. Like, I'm trying to survive like everyone else
yeah.
is. I mean, I try to like now read good articles or, just do something to kind of get my brain in gear.
Get going.
Yeah.
What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Best advice I've ever been given. Probably something Buffett said, like, if you're not going to own it forever, don't hold it for, 10 minutes or 10 hours. Like,
yep.
Buy it to keep it. And that, of course, just resonates with me. Like,
yep.
I am a holder. And it also keeps me away from, things that I know don't have value. It kept me away from the AMC and the, all these crazy GameStop trades and,
yeah.
I like, and don't like, I'm a money person. So I was tempted, like, like people are making a lot of money out there, but
yeah.
No.
All right. I think I know the answer to this, but if you had a billboard on the busiest highway in Philly or LA, Maybe both. What would you put on the billboard for the
Own
world?
some shit.
Own some shit.
Own some shit.
I love it.
Oh yeah.
That's gonna be the title of this podcast episode.
Oh yeah.
All right. How can people find you or reach you?
Social media is the best place. Social media platforms. Mostly Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Ayesha Selden on every social media platform.
You're the boss. Thank you so much for
Thanks for
coming
having
down
me.
today. This was awesome.